Good evening. Please join me in a prayer. Our Father in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Amen.
Amen.
We don't have our flag holder here tonight. Anybody have a flag handy?
I got a Statue of Liberty. That's as close as I can get.
Okay. Well, everybody just somebody, Don Lindeman just jumped up. He's got something.
Yeah.
He's got an Ohio in there too.
Can you see this?
Yeah, if you
Yeah,
hold it,
that's
if you hold
got
it still, it'll probably show up.
There you go.
Oh, Patrick has the same thing.
Okay. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice.
Very good.
I'm not sure where that feedback's coming from. Josh, can you tell if it's from me?
I'm trying to figure it out. It doesn't appear to be you.
Okay. All right. We will go ahead with the roll call, please.
Mr. Powell,
I see him. He's here.
okay. Mr. Gertz,
Here.
Mr. Lynn,
Here.
Mr. Albrecht,
Here.
Mr. Lindeman,
He's on mute.
Here.
Mr. Fitzgerald,
Don,
Here.
you're gonna have to turn your one of your volumes down. I think we found you. Pardon me. Go ahead, Carla.
Mrs. Edichico.
Here.
Thank you, Carla. We have no minutes to approve today. I will, any minutes that are in the backlog, I'll get those out with tonight's minutes. Audience participation. Would you like to go ahead and Carla and read the questions from the audience?
All right, I've got two letters. First one is from Dwayne Mount. I, Dwayne Mount of 2113 Bolster Drive, wish to advise council to vote for seeking an attorney to pursue and demand that the poles on school property be taken down and the wires go underground as required by council's vote December 26, 2019. I feel from the beginning the administration never had the city and more importantly the citizen on Bolster's back ever. Plain and simple, now that council has upheld that the wire should go underground, there appears to be no way to enforce that action. We as a community must have council do that which is right, not only which is easy. This situation has been going on for 3 years. What does it take? Also, let's remember that the school board and city council were present when the PDD was passed on January 31st, 2017. And to the point, the administration should be the enforcer of such matters. Thank you for letting me make my feelings be heard.
Okay.
And then we have another letter from Robert Ashbrook.
Does anybody want to respond to that? I mean, it's.
I'll make a motion. I'll make a motion that it be received and filed and be discussed at
Okay.
the proper time when the ordinance is, or the resolution is read.
Okay.
Bob's is kind of around the same thing if you wanted me to read through that first.
That's fine. Continue.
Okay. Dated April 21st, 2020, to all members of Reading City Council, I am writing to urge passage of a resolution retaining the law firm Strauss Troy Co. to enforce the requirements of Ordinance 2017-12. I propose that there is far more at stake here than the matter of a willful violation of Reading zoning code. Beyond the concerns of this particular case are implications with respect to the role and authority of council while acting in its legislative capacity. If duly passed legislation can be ignored or subjectively unenforced by the administrative authority having the enforcement duty, then council serves no function to the public life. Rather, we can all be governed by executive fiat, separation of powers be damned. Whether you agree or disagree with the requirement, undergrounding of utilities at the school site, is not the question. The decision was made in 2003 with the adoption of the zoning code making clear such requirement for PDD designation, tactically agreed to by the school district in 2016 with their application for PDD approval, passage of ordinance 2017-12 with school district's assent, and affirmed most recently on December 26. All this following a highly structured yet open public process. No, this is about things far broader and more far-reaching than all that. Consider, if the purpose of public law is, in part, to protect the personal and property rights of citizens, under what conditions, if any, can that protection be denied? Does the little guy doing everything by the book in his efforts for redress ultimately become the victim? Who stands for the individual, your constituent, when the protection of the civil authority is politely and properly sought on any matter yet withheld? Voluntary compliance with duly enacted just laws is a hallmark of a free society. Without this, we are governed by the law of the jungle. If a deep-pocketed, highly influential institution is permitted to thumb its nose at the rule of law in a highly visible matter, I fear for us all as a community. And emboldened by getting away with it once, repeat performances are more likely to follow. Take note, all folks living or representing the interest of those same people in the vicinity of Hilltop or Central schools. If this matter is swept under the rug, citizens can reasonably wonder what else is causing that big lump in the middle of the floor. To ensure confidence and the legitimacy of all governmental actions, it is important that the resolution be approved, and I ask for your individual collective support. Sincerely, Robert J. Ashbrook, 221 Walnut Street, Reading, Ohio.
Okay, thank you, Carla. It may seem like that we're very quick at council here. We have a resolution later on that we will discuss. We're not that quick, but we were on top. We're on top of this. You have any communications to be read? Carla?
Sorry, I do not. Sorry, we were trying to
Okay.
figure out the phone.
I'm going to go ahead and go to council committee reports. Finance Chairman, Mr. Gertz.
Thank you, Mr. President. Finance, of course, is a major hurdle and question. I think that not only Reading, but all of the country is facing. And I compliment President Trump and Vice President Pence and the efforts that they have made and the committees to solve this terrible problem that came from China, Wuhan, China. And I believe that we as the city of Reading have to look at our finances as well. We did pass a appropriation ordinance last week. I was a little concerned. I did vote against it because there are some issues I thought we need to explore. I thought maybe even doing a second temporary appropriation. During the last several weeks, I'm not going to steal Sabrina's thunder or Dave, but we've had some conference calls that have been taking place. We do have another resolution on the floor tonight to explore that because unfortunately, City of Cincinnati, it's my understanding, had to furlough, I believe it was 1,700 people in the City of Cincinnati as their employees, and they have a tremendous shortfall of cash. I don't want to see the city in that realm. Unfortunately, I expect that it may be the case. As has been said many times on various levels of communication, especially with reports from the president, I know everyone's trying to get us back to work so that we can generate people getting rid of cabin fever, I guess, as well as getting back to generating our lives in a normal fashion with the revenues that all of us need to live. I compliment the United States Congress and the president for providing additional funding throughout the United States to families and businesses. I know a couple of them applied for this assistance under the SBA program, and I hope that all of this will help us, but we still are confronted with well over $3 trillion worth of additional debt that's created in our country. And the only way we're going to take care of that is get back to work. Centering more on the city of Reading, I am apprehensive that we are likewise in a similar situation. We're going to have to look at it from various perspectives. That is going to be difficult, I think. We're going to have to work with our unions and police and fire and all of our employees, I think, to examine ways to approach saving funds. Although I'm probably going to be criticized, I have a resolution on the floor tonight to do some appraisals and do some studies that are needed. It's all coming out of the stadium fund, which is independent of other funds, and presently has well over $100,000 in that fund that's used for the stadium. We are, and I won't steal Mr. Lindemann's thunder, I think he's looking into trying to determine how that came to be. We did have some things in the past that we did in finance that were centered around providing revenue to, this was several years ago, for taking care of track and some other capital improvements necessary for the stadium itself. But in the general fund and in the earnings tax fund, those revenues are probably going to be a concern for us, to say the least. I think that it's important that we all kind of hold together as we're expected to in our community, and I compliment the efforts of all our city employees. I know that we're the service department, for instance. I think they run 6 people work and then they're off for a week, so that we didn't want everybody, if it did happen, to be sick at one time. There are people staggering their times at the city hall offices. The city offices are closed to daily traffic, but they still are operating, and I compliment all our people who are working hard to keep delivering services to our city. But again, the finances are going to be an issue. Again, Mr. Lindemann did inquire about the funds from that we're going to get for our agreement to grant easement to the Metropolitan Sewer District, and he may want to speak about that later, so I'll leave that up to him. And Governor DeWine and the Bureau of Workmen's Compensation has elected to review the funds that are in that on a statewide basis, and we will be getting money back, as many businesses will be, and I hope that helps our businesses to be able to stay afloat. And I'll leave it up to Sabrina. She and Dave Stevenson worked on this other resolution that we're going to read this evening, so that we can establish a method, if necessary, to seek monies to stay afloat. But anything we choose to do, as they will explain, I'm sure, it will result in a payback. Even though we borrow these funds, we're going to have to pay them back. And I'll leave it up to Sabrina. She's been doing a great job looking into the federal government helping municipalities. But my little bit of research I've done, it primarily is centered on large municipalities, not cities of our size. Hopefully that may come about in the future, or if the work that they have done in contacting some of our major taxpayers, hopefully we won't suffer the consequences that other communities are suffering. We don't have a large reserve account. Other communities that are adjacent to us, I'm told one has as much as $25 million in the bank, another about 15 or 18 in the bank. Unfortunately, Reading doesn't sit on those kinds of cash wealth that we can use. But I think if we all continue to work hard together and we look into avenues of helping our businesses continue to operate effectively, that we will get past this. And I look forward to the president and hopefully Governor DeWine's attempt to get us back going in the next 2 weeks. So maybe we won't have to do this kind of a program. We'll be allowed back in our council chambers where we belong, working together there. So that's all I have. Anybody wants to ask me any questions, feel free to do so.
I have a couple questions. Chris, do you see my hand up just as a matter of protocol here? Chris,
Yes.
do you see it?
I was muted. I did see it. I called on you. You're good to go.
Okay.
Sorry, I was muted.
Thank you. Mr. Gertz, you mentioned the MSD and the payment. I don't have any, as a matter of fact, any information on that. I was hoping that you would be able to tell us, or Sabrina Smith or Patrick, about if anybody got in touch with them to ask if they can move up the payment for that anytime soon.
Well, I apologize to you that, I'm sorry. Is my correct forum here to go forward?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, Pat Ross, Mr. Ross sent out an email, and I apologize, you may not have gotten that. But we did this committee that was meeting over the phone on several Fridays, and maybe Sabrina could report more detail, but that money will be coming through. I think it's $105,000, and hopefully within, Sabrina, correct me if I'm wrong, 6 to 8 weeks, something like that.
Okay.
Yeah, that's correct. It's, they said there's no expediting it, but that process usually takes about that long, on the low end 4 weeks.
And the second question is, you mentioned the reserve fund or the growth fund. I believe that we recently decided to put a percentage into that fund for a rainy day fund, so to speak. So I don't know, Mr. Gertz or Ms. Smith or Mrs. Smith, if you can address that. Can you tell us how much is in that fund right now? I mean, is it going to be helpful?
There is 53,000, and I still have to transfer some over there. So there's going to be about 58,000 in there once all the transfers are done for the previous months of this year.
Okay, thank you. And as far as you mentioned the stadium fund, Mr. Smith also sent to me a breakdown for 2018-19 of what went into that fund. But unfortunately, the only one that I was able to print was just the very last page, which doesn't give me a lot of information. So unless it's very detailed in several pages, Sabrina, maybe you could address that when the question comes up later.
Okay, yes, sir, unless you want me to talk about the income now. It's up to you.
I don't think it's necessary now, but maybe later. Thank you.
Just a comment, if I could comment on that. Am I okay to speak? Am I right?
Yeah, I was just telling Sabrina, or I was muted. She can report on that, but go ahead, Tony, first.
Well, first of all, the stadium fund, my recollection, and I don't have the specifics, but approximately, I'm going to guess 10 to 15 years ago, the city and the school contributed about $125,000 apiece to take care of reconstructing and redoing the track, as well as some other times that we did improvements up there as well. And then it was decided to create this fund so that money would be put into it in the future by both the school and the city. Now, my recollection is that it was not maintained as well as it was intended to, and the amounts were not catastrophic to lead up to what we would need. But I did not look at it in detail, but I am a little surprised that we have this kind of money in that fund, because it seems like it's grown more aggressively in the last few years. I wanted to make sure that the money that is coming in for the maintenance of the facilities, such as last year, we received about $25,000 from the school for the maintenance of the stadium. And the stadium basically now is only used by the Reading school system. So I don't know if that was put into the stadium fund. I want to explore that, because it should have been put into the general fund, in my opinion. The stadium fund was originally created with a purpose of replacement of things such as the track. And ironically, the track needs some attention. But at the same time, I am a little apprehensive about how this fund is as large as it is. And maybe I've been remiss in not keeping my eye on it a little more aggressively, but any monies that comes in for the maintenance as a facility should go, in my opinion, into the general fund. And I did not report on this earlier, but we also have money going into the FEMA fund, which are grant monies, which I don't believe belong there. And we as a committee of council need to meet at some point in time and correct this situation and explore appropriate methods of appropriating money from funds. They're not there just to be spent. I think the council has to make sure they're in a position to appropriate monies before they can be spent. So I don't know if that makes it clear or it makes it worse.
It helped me a little bit there.
I'm going to go ahead and forward the email that I sent to Dawn. It contains 2018, 2019, and 2020 income for the stadium fund, as well as expenditures from the stadium fund. But that, again, is the 240 account. That is not the 101 stadium fund part. So I will send that off to everybody.
Okay, thank you. Don?
Yes, I did. That's exactly what I was interested in when, as Mr. Gertz pointed out, I was wondering if the money for the stadium lease, $25,000, is going into the stadium fund instead of the general fund, where I think it should go, because the expenditures are from the Public Works Department and buying fertilizer and paying for the water that's on the grass and the mixtures they use for painting the lines. And maybe that might not be accurate, because I'm not real sure what exactly the school does to participate. And I know they do some things, but the bottom line is, if that $25,000 is going directly into the stadium fund, I think that should be going into the general fund, so that we can support the Public Works Department that does most of the work at the stadium and Bemis Field, Haney Park, etc.
Yeah, that's understandable, and I guess you'll take care of that in committee and come to council with a recommendation of how maybe to transfer that money if that indeed is the problem, right?
Well, I think the most important thing is what Sabrina is going to send everybody, and it'll pretty much show the last 3 years where the money went, what money went in and what money went out of the stadium fund.
Yeah, but it's going to take an ordinance to move it now if it's in the wrong place.
Well, okay, I appreciate that, and you're right. But first, we need to find out if everything is
In the right
as it
place.
should be.
Yeah. Okay. Any other questions for finance?
The only other thing in finance, I don't know if, but I thought everyone got this, and I'm reading the email from Mr. Ross. It did not go to everyone. We anticipate $92,000 to come in from the refund of our workman's compensation premiums. Fortunately, the state has been in a good position, in the city, and not having people get hurt. And the fund has gotten pretty large. It's well over $1 billion. I think they're giving back to businesses and communities. And so with that, I think we're projecting about $217,000 additional this year that we did not expect. But I don't know how much that's going to offset the shortfall of the earnings tax. As everyone, I guess, knows, they should know that taxes are not due until I believe it's July 15th. And we have, I think that Mr. Gertz, Mel Gertz, reported on our phone conversation that we were usually taking around $1 million in April. I don't know what the actual number is, but as of the date we had the last conversation, it was a little over 500,000, if I remember. Sabrina, correct me if I'm wrong, if you will, and Dave Stevens.
I think that was last week, right?
Well, I think he did tell us some of that last week, yes. But
yeah, so that's about halfway through the month. So hopefully the second half will be as good and we won't have as big a discrepancy.
So just to comment on the city earnings tax fund, the 220, to date has been brought in $649,122.63. Into the general fund has been $283,643 $283,000. So that's also because the property tax hit this month in April. So that kind of gives you a picture. We're usually around 1.3, I think, million for April. So it's always over $1 million. And it is the 21st of the month. That is the update.
And how much is it right now, those two numbers? About 800,000?
600 and something, wasn't it?
It's 649 plus 283. That's what we brought in so far.
900,000 now. And we still have 5 more days of month. Okay. All right, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Gertz. Utilities, Lands and Buildings Chairman, Mr. Lindeman.
Thank you, Chris. Couple of things.
I don't know what happened, but I don't hear you.
Sorry,
I don't hear you, Don.
I'm not muted, am I?
There you go.
There
Now
you
I
go.
hear you.
Okay. All right. Well, anyway, Bennett Kotler, who is the manager for the bench project down by the BYO fields in the Mill Creek, reported. I called and talked. Well, he called me and told me that that their project is moving up a little bit. They're going to possibly start removing dirt by on a week or a week and a few days, and they'll probably have the trucks coming off of Columbia down by the walking track. I'm not real sure how they're going to do that, but that's what he told me. And also that Foreman Farms in Evendale is interested in the soil. I think he's working out something with them that may be more beneficial. Anyway, the other thing is, if people are like my wife and I, we're taking advantage of the time to clean out, and we're getting a lot of paper and cardboard and things like that that can go into the recycle bin. If you don't have a bin that's picked up at your house, you can go down by the stadium. They have 8 big dumpsters, and certainly would be beneficial to put that recycling in those bins. Paper, cardboard, glass, plastic containers that have lids on them, all sorts of cans, whether they be aluminum or tin. And like I say, you can still sign up with the city and have your recycling picked up at your door on every Friday as of right now. There was a question that came up. Somebody wanted to know, what do you do with leftover paint? Matthew 25 takes that up in blue ash. They dump it all together. It comes out to be whatever color it is, and they can put it to good use. I have a question for Patrick later on, and maybe he can tell me about the project 2.2 acres located within down by the Mill Creek that we passed last 2019-32. Anyway, so I'll check in with him later when he reports. That's all I have.
All right, any questions from Mr. Lindeman? Thank you, Mr. Lindeman. Zoning, Plan and Environment Chairman, Mr. Powell.
I have no report at this time.
Okay. Any questions for Mr. Powell? Thank you, Mr. Powell. Laws and Contracts Chairman, Ms. Edichico.
Thank you, Chris. Really, we can talk about this later when the ordinance comes up, but I was just surprised to see the ordinance at our last committee meeting. We were going to have the administration ask the school if there was interest in purchasing the stadium before getting the appraisal. If they were, then we were going to move forward with that. As of right now, with the stay-at-home order and online schooling, that's not their top priority. I do agree that an appraisal needs to be done, but there's a few things in the ordinance that do concern me. One of those being the mention of other uses for the property. In section 2, where it states the council of the city of Reading directs that the said appraisal shall be conducted to determine the use of the property as a potential industrial/commercial property or property used strictly for athletic purposes. The wording of this, I don't agree with selling the stadium property out for commercial use under our student athletes. So I also sent out information back on March 14th regarding what I found in the history directory of Reading. The booklet was from 1966, and it was about the purchase of the stadium. I don't know if everybody saw that. It states that shortly after World War II, the Kiwanis Club purchased the land and the buildings of the old Unexcelled Chemical Company at Market and North Street. This was the former A.L. Dew Fireworks Company. The Kiwanis Club advanced $5,700 towards the purchase of the property and then assigned its interest to the city of Reading so that the children of our city may have an athletic field. The members volunteered in clearing the land and obtaining bulldozers, air compressors, other equipment free of charge in order to get the land in condition for a play field. The estimated value of their labor and equipment at the time was $15,000. At the time this book was printed in 1966, it said, at present, the city and the Board of Education are preparing plans for a stadium with modern shower, locker rooms, and concession stands. So I've been trying to find documentation or any information about who paid for the stands, the building on the property, the concessions, locker rooms, etc. And that might even affect whether or not we can even sell the property and how that would all work. So that's something that I was looking into. But with the COVID-19 pandemic, obviously the stadium contract negotiations have been put on hold. And with the city and the school both taken each day at a time, I feel like it's unnecessary to be conducting an appraisal as of right now. So that is all I have for tonight.
Okay, Mr. Lindeman?
This is Eddie Chico. I think I might be able to help you out with some of that. As you know, I have about 4 large books. And just before this hit, I had made an appointment with the mayor and Patrick to sit down and go over those books and just let them know all the information I have. Off the top of my head, I can't recite, exactly what's in there with the stadium, but I do have a lot of information. I know that there was in the deed, it was mentioned that the property should be used for specific things. And further, I believe there was an amendment to that for the city to ask that that be dropped out of the deed. I can't tell you exactly how that shook out, but I think maybe the research is something that could be done. Doesn't necessarily have to be done now, but I think it would be important to do in the future. And I agree, there's so many things going on right now. I would actually think that ask Mr. Gertz to withdraw that for this evening.
Well, can I comment?
Yes, go ahead, Mr. Gertz.
Well, first of all, the ordinance is, we're presuming that there's some attempt. I even had Scuttlebutt come back that this is some attempt to discredit, or I think I have a raw opinion of this, the Board of Education or the school board or something of that nature, which nothing could be further from the truth. I've been involved with the city numerous methods of service in numerous ways over the years. I've always had a good rapport and looked at it from, and I am offended. I won't say which city official is a very principled city official made this comment to another individual that's very offensive to me personally. But in response to your comments, Mrs. Edechico, the city of Reading back in the 60s is when they first passed the first earnings tax. And that whole construction of that facility was about $600 and some thousand, and it was paid by the city. And I'm confident that had it been contributed in a vein that both political entities, being the school and the city, they would have been a joint form of ownership for the facility. So I have no problem, but if you read the rest of the ordinance, and even in my discussion with the law director, it was at his suggestion, and I agreed. I think it's a great idea that we do a thorough title examination. Now, I don't know if everyone's familiar with that term, but it'll go back and look at all of the records that are available through the county recorder's office and analyze all of the documents over the past number of years, all the way back to when it was owned by the fireworks company. I recall, I'm not all that old, but in 1951, there was the Centennial. And for many years, that was called Centennial Park because my understanding, I can't say I know it directly, but the money that was generated from the Centennial in 1951 as a profit went into the use. There used to be a building down there. It actually was used when they were remodeling the council chambers. So that building has since been demolished. And so the city has put a lot of effort into the maintenance of that property. And truly, it was a city stadium. I mean, we had St. Pierre and Paul, you had Sacred Heart at one time, and St. Michael's rented it. Mount Notre Dame used it. Reading Little Leaguers used it. Of course, Reading School System used it. But today, it's strictly a facility for the Reading schools, which is fine. But as previously mentioned by two individuals, and that was, one was a former councilman, I think it was Mr. Cox. I don't know where he got the numbers, but he came up with some pretty large numbers about the value of the property. I'm not sure that that was accurate. I don't know that he knew it was an absolute certainty. I'm not putting words into his mouth either, but that became an issue of how to use that property. And recently, the treasurer of the city talked about the use of the property. If we get into a financial bind of some sort, and we are going to be faced with a lot of continuing issues relative to finance, we may have to look at, we just had the PNC property is taken over recently by the Port Authority, and hopefully that'll generate additional revenue through jobs. And I'm hoping that that it will not be necessary, but if we at least ought to get a idea of what the property would be worth purely as a recreational facility, and or whether there would be a commerce or industrial use. And I'm not intending to pursue any current sale of the property, but we've been going back and forth in our committee. We've been going back and forth long before you were involved as to even what is the value of that property. And I think it behooves us to explore that in detail and to get the title examination completed. I know that I think Tom Bemis and maybe others that are involved with the school system believe we should just give it to the school system. And if that's the council and the citizens' choice, I think the least they ought to be able to know is what is the value of the property and what are the other alternative uses that could be made of the property. The idea that you have a book that's a historical document that somebody drafted in 1966. There's other historical documents that are floating around too. I have a couple of them. I don't have them with me. But that is not conducive to any proof that we're responsible as a city to deliver that property to any particular group or agency unless there is something that's a restrictive or a protective covenant in the actual documents of ownership. And that's what I want to find out. I want to spend a few bucks and go get it. I know I've been criticized because, it's $3,000 and maybe we shouldn't spend $3,000 now, but anybody in business is going to have to look to improve their operations. You sometimes have to spend a few dollars to find out exactly where you stand in relation to its value, its use, what its potential income value may be. And I have a grandson who plays on the football team. So it's not as though I'm trying to, shed any disdain on the use of the facility by the school. As a matter of fact, I even approached and discussed, if you recall, in our committee, that improvements be made to the facility because you brought something before council with some criticisms about the condition of the facility. And I talked about trying to explore a method to repair those. We even made a trip and went down through the facility. And if that's what we're going to do, that's fine too. But unless we know what it's worth, what it can be used for, what are the restrictions, how far back to the records. They can go back to literally, I used to be a title examiner about 50 years ago. You can go all the way back to Sims Purchase in history when it was taken from the, when it was acquired through the federal government as part of the state of Ohio. So the records can be found, and what's in the records is what's applicable, not what's written in a book from 1966 or what people have talked about or what they think is the case or their opinion. You know, I mean, I believe that Mr. Tom Bemis, it's a citizen's property. It should be given to the school. Well, another avenue of what I'm exploring, why I want to get a value, to be blunt, is I'm concerned as a second ward councilman that the central school property, which belongs to the school, well, I guess I could argue like Mr. Bemis argues, it belongs to the citizens and certainly attuned to the people in the second ward, of how are they going to use that property? I don't want to see low-income housing or anything like that put down in there. I will fight that tooth and nail in any kind of zoning attempt that's made by the school, which I'll digress for a split second, because one of the arguments that the school is making about the polls is they're not subject to these zoning obligations, and I don't agree with that. They are subject to it. I would like to see us do a swap. Let them appraise the central school property, see what it's worth. We'll switch the central school property and give them the stadium, and they can do whatever they want with it. So there are other ideas and purposes for getting an appraisal and finding out what are the real uses that can be made of the property.
Okay, good. We're going to go ahead and end at that, because we will talk again when the ordinance is read. Any other questions for Ms. Edichico? Thank you, Mrs. Edichico. Public Health and Safety Chairman, Mr. Fishasher.
Thank you, Chris. First, I want to again congratulate Brian Edens on becoming the new police chief for the city of Reading. I've known Brian, well, since he started here in Reading. Basically, I worked with him when I was on the fire department. And, we became friends then, and I still consider him a friend now. And I know that he'll do a great job for the city. And we'll be able to fill this role without difficulty. I'd also like to thank Darren Lunsford for stepping into the role of acting chief. He did a great job during the very active and actually chaotic times. So again, I want to thank you, Darren, for everything that you did. And, it was a pleasure working with you. I did talk to or email with Brian, and I hope to get with him by the end of the week. I wanted to get him settled in first and just touch base and see if there's anything that the safety committee can do to help him in his new role. The other thing I have for this evening is I'd be remiss if I wouldn't mention the ongoing COVID-19 restrictions and just mention that we are following the state and what is and isn't allowed. For now, I encourage everyone to still stay in. If you must go out, wear a mask and gloves, and remember your social distancing. And above all, wash your hands at least a dozen times a day. And with that, that's all I have for tonight, Chris. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fishasher. Service Chairman, Mr. Albrin.
Okay, we're switching over.
Sorry. Hold on.
Oh,
I'm sorry. Hold on.
okay. I have no report other than to say that the service department continues to do a fantastic job of responding to all of the things that they have to do for the city, and now with a staff of 6 rather than 12. But again, that is as a result of the COVID-19 requirements. But they're out there. I see them all over. The few times I get to leave the house because my kids got me quarantined here. Again, the work is taking place. The branches and that have been cut down because the people are using the time to take care of their yards. So again, they're doing a great job as usual under some very difficult circumstances. So that's all I have.
Okay. Mr. Don?
Chris?
Yes.
Yes. Mr. Albrecht, could you, for everybody's benefit, let us know exactly how the Public Works Department are performing their duties? As you mentioned, the mulching trucks going out, a little different. They have a pickup following the mulching truck so that they can maintain their distance. And I believe that there's special working hours. They alternate weeks. Is that correct?
He's on mute.
Yeah, you're on mute again, Dennis.
Yeah, they're working 6 and 6. 6 people one week and then 6 people the next week. And the thing with the trailer car is that they don't want to have 3 in the cab, which is what they usually do, so that they've got, some safety factors going on there. So there is the trailer.
I can attest to the fact that they're doing an excellent job. They have picked up here at least once since the change has been made, and they're very nice, very friendly. They do a great job. I think they do a little more pickup than they absolutely have to do. I mean, I can get my rake out too and clean up a little bit, but yeah, I think they're doing a great job. I appreciate it.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Albrecht. And then Recreation Chairman, Mr. Lynn.
Thank you very much. I just want to report that May 2nd, the pool signups were scheduled to happen at Hayford Fieldhouse. Has currently been canceled until we receive, well, that's not going to happen on May 2nd. We're going to wait till we receive more COVID-19 stay-at-home orders on May 1st before we decide when to start that. The hope is that signups will happen on May 9th at Hayford Fieldhouse. But for now, the May 2nd sign-up has been canceled, and hopefully we can start that at May 9th, and we'll have a better understanding of that when more updates come on and the basically the stay-at-home order things change with the COVID-19. Other than that, I have no other report.
All right, Mr. Lindeman.
Yes. Mr. Lynn, in connection with this work that's going to be done next to the BYO fields there by the Mill Creek, is there any changes in the BYO baseball or any of that? I mean, because they're going to start, within a week.
I have not heard. I can't report on that. I haven't heard that there's going to be any changes at this time.
Okay, well, maybe Patrick can give us a little more information on that. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Lynn. I've got any new business that is city related, anything that's come up that's city related. I think there was some dump trucks that got answered by Patrick and Randy. Is there any further comments on those that you two have?
No, just that I was, I sent her a response today that, I didn't stay for a long period of time, but I did kind of monitor Friday and Monday and did not see the large quantity of trucks coming down that she had talked about. If you recall, there was an airplane sitting on 75 the day that she had sent the email. And the speculation is that the trucks were coming because they were being diverted onto Cross County. They got off at Ridge and were coming down to get back to the highway. I'm sure that if this was an ongoing thing, it would have been mentioned more than this one time. So okay. I did tell her I looked into it. And as far as there being any ordinances for trucks being on residential roads, there isn't. The only ordinance that I could find is an ordinance that states truck parking overnight in residential areas. And if you recall correctly, we modified that probably last year. So, I have not heard back from her, but I did follow up on that. And while I'm on that topic, everybody would be wise to check your profile on the city's webpage. They all need to be updated. Most do not have their email addresses on there. So, it would behoove you to maybe get on and check. And if there are changes, I'm sure you could send them into Patrick and he would get them updated for us.
That's the preferred method, Mr. Ross?
Yes.
Okay, great. Okay, any other business that we can refer to
Yes.
committee? Go ahead, Mr.
Yes. Hello,
Yes, go ahead.
Chris.
Go ahead.
For Randy, I'm not sure if you were talking about Riesenberg Lane and the truck traffic down there, but I'll remind everybody that when this bench project gets going, they have 800 truckloads of dirt. We're going to have, I'm just guessing, 800 trucks moving in and out of that area. So if that's the same area, then you might want to let the lady know that that's coming.
No, Don, this was coming down Benson Street
Okay.
from like Columbia Cross County, and they were cutting across 3rd Street.
Okay, I don't know, Patrick.
She had emailed you, but she missed your email up. You would have gotten it.
Okay, no, I didn't hear anything, but I'm sure Patrick is going to be looking into some kind of signage for Columbia when they start these trucks rolling.
What signage are you wanting me to put on Columbia?
Well, if they're going to have trucks coming in and out of that field, I mean, that would be one sign that could be posted somewhere, coming and going. Be cautious, trucks coming in and out of the field. Other than that, I don't know, that would be something that you would discuss with the chief, I guess, maybe, Randy.
I'm going to guess they're going to turn and go up Columbia to Reading and then go up to Gorman Farms if that agreement ends up happening.
That's what I was told.
Yes. Okay. I guess when that starts to happen, we'll make sure that people know about it and they're safe. All right, I'm going to go on to reports of officials. Safety Service Director, Mr. Ross.
Thanks, Chris. I wanted to just clarify a few things that were said earlier. The BWC amount that Mr. Gertz referenced, the amount that I emailed, and this was just to the group that's been doing conference calls on Fridays. We were slated to receive approximately $217,000 this year, but that is a difference of $92,000 from last year. Last year we received $125,000, so it's an additional $92,000 for 2020. So that's a $92,000, and then the $105,000 from MSD. And I did talk with Tony Dick when one of their problems is they need signatures on all the documents for that. And he said one of the people who actually processes the check, they only have 2 people, and both of them they didn't think were people that cut checks. So they have to bring somebody back, but they need a lot of signatures from the city of Cincinnati. So, I mean, there's a whole bunch of people. That's why will take 4 to 6 weeks to do so, to cut that check.
I appreciate you checking on it, Patrick.
Yeah, and then as far as the bench, the way they're going to go, Don, it's it's not going to be on the fields. It's about where the old gate was, that way heading north. Their entry, I was over there this morning with Bennett and the contractor. As you recall, the property from the road heading all the way to the creek was donated. Well, some of it was already ours, but was donated by the former property owners. So they asked for, there's not an easy way in and out for all those trucks to get to the creek and the heavy equipment. So they're actually going to put a temporary hole in the fence and put a gate up north. If you walk down the track or the trail, It's kind of even where the parking lot is for one of those businesses in there. So they'll be able to pull their equipment in and out rather than coming directly up in, like right by the fields. And so they'll be coming in further north where they're, away from the Hayfie fields. And Don, I don't believe there's any VYO that's going to occur this spring. I don't know for sure, but I don't think VYO has announced it, but I'm pretty sure they're probably not going to have a season this spring. So
are those trucks going to be coming down Riesenberg?
They'll go Riesenberg and then leave to Columbia. Yes.
I wonder what that's going to do. I mean, you think you're worried about that?
Well, there's not really an alternative for them to exit at this time.
Okay.
So unless we, that's really the only way in and out currently. They can't go through the Dow property because there's not an appropriate roadway through there at this time.
Patrick, where are they taking the dirt?
What Don said, Gorman Farm has a need for, they want to level out a lot of stuff. So they're going to take the dirt there. They're going to take, because they're ripping out the trail from, like I said, the part that's being ripped out to accommodate the bench. So all that trailway and asphalt has to come out. So they'll be taking that just right across the creek, well, going around, but over to Barrett and into those piles. So that's where they'll dump that stuff. So that's convenient that there's two very close locations. It's convenient, I mean, price wise too, that they don't have to haul it, 20, 30, 40 minutes away. So as Don mentioned in his report, they told me by the first or second week of May, they would like to get started, and they're going to start, and they do like a whole row. They'll start at the further north end of where the bench is, and then move their way south. So that'll be kicking off in a couple weeks.
I'd like to make a comment about that, if I could.
I didn't hear.
Can I make a comment about that?
Go ahead, Mr. Gertz.
I think for the people who are watching, maybe they forget or don't recall what we're doing there with that bench. I don't remember the exact number. Maybe Mr. Ross can correct me. I thought it was $350,000 grant that is occurring for us to proceed, which, by the way, former Councilman Mr. Ashbrook had a lot to do with working on this project years ago. But it's for flood control, and the purpose of this, I wasn't familiar with these terms, a bench, is that we actually design a place that on that north end of fallow land that when the creek rises, it will flood that area, and then it'll be designed to drain more rapidly back into the creek when the water goes down. So it's an attempt to reduce some of the flooding that'll be downstream, which I'm concerned, of course, because it's all in Ward 2. So I sometimes I think we just assume that the public or the people watching remember all these things, and I think it helps us to make sure that we can repeat it often enough to let them know that this is an effort for flood control for the valley. If I'm correct, Mr. Ross, you can correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, I mean, it's a little bit more. It's about $385, but yeah, we got a grant to do that through the state of Ohio and through CDBG. And as Mr. Gertz said, it is for it's a long-term plan to help flood reduction and, frankly, to help alleviate the burden on the people that are in the valley that have to pay, anywhere from $800 to $1,500 more in insurance because they are within the floodplain. And a lot of these people, even in actual floods, have never even got a drop of water. So this is kind of phase one of projects that hopefully will be done over time that will, be able to alleviate the burden on some of those people that are paying that insurance. So this is a first stage, and then ideally it continues to move south because we own property at the Hayfie Fields and Koenig, and then there are, because those were all things because we got the grant, and then I think it was AMEC did the entire presentation showing a series of different projects, together. So but
Okay.
that'll be gone. I sent a letter, and I actually talked to people in Senator Portman, Senator Brown, Representative Wenstrup, and Representative Shabbat's office. Right now, Congress is in the midst of discussions on additional aid due to the coronavirus. One thing that was not included in the original aid package, is to include all governments regardless of size. Local governments like ours and many others we're not included because our population isn't high enough. We're asking them to consider all local governments, because we're local governments like ours and several others. I mean, not just Reading. We're on the front lines. We provide 24/7 police, fire, paramedic services, as well as our public works doing all of our roads, our parks, utilities. So, it's vital that they don't forget about us. And, all the money right now went to very large municipal governments and state governments. Nothing was really filtered down to the smaller governments. According to U.S. Conference of Mayors, put together an estimated reduction of revenue for all of the local governments in Southwest Ohio. And for Reading, their estimate is just under $500,000 of lost revenue. So that's not revenue that we think we'll get back. That's revenue that, since all the businesses are not working and they're not paying wages, those wages aren't going to be made up. So the estimate is roughly $500,000 at this time that they're looking at. And I got an email from Hamilton County Administrator's office, and local governments aren't necessarily asking like, hey, give us all our money. It's maybe provide an access to borrow money through them rather than having to go out to a bank, or hey, base aid based on population. So we have, for example, say they were going to give $1 million or $1 billion in Ohio, we have 10,000 people. So we get X amount of dollars proportionally for local governments that provide these services. So a letter was sent to all their offices. Already received a response from Senator Portman's office, and he said he is already in those discussions advocating flexibility for those funds to be used for governments like ours. So hopefully, some of those things do occur. Randy already mentioned it, but do want to thank Darren Lunsford, Lieutenant Lunsford. He spent about 4 months as our acting chief, and it was a busy 4 months, I will say. So thank him for the work, and congratulations again to Brian Edens. For anyone that's unfamiliar with Brian Edens, he has been with the city for the last 20 years, and he has 28 years of total police experience, and all of his experience is on the road. So we have somebody who knows, up until a week ago, he was an on the road lieutenant. So he knows what it's like in the field to work. So we're grateful, that he wanted the job, and we wish him luck. Lastly, I just want to thank the mayor, Bonnie Rack, Susan Slavey. They really spearheaded an effort the day before Easter. I got a call Friday that they wanted to, get in the back of pickup trucks and bring the Easter Bunny around town. So once we did that, we started talking about how we're going to do this, what routes we're going to do. And then we contacted Nancy Marshall from Talk of the Town. She somehow luckily knew 2 Easter bunnies as well. So we were able to have 3 Easter bunnies going on different routes Saturday morning. It was actually my favorite thing that I've done in 10 years from the city, just to see the smiles. And it wasn't just kids. There were older couples that came outside and they're just waving, happy to see people. People are striving for interactions, but we had Easter bunnies waving and beeping our horns in every street. So I want to thank Bo, Bonnie, and Susan because it was their brainchild. And then they contacted the schools, and we had I can't even count how many teachers showed up in their own cars, decorated them. They followed behind the Easter Bunny, got to see the kids that they've been missing too. So I want to thank everyone that participated in that, and that's all I have, Chris.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Ross. Law Director, Mr. Stevens.
Oh, yeah, Chris, I had my hand up. I wanted
Oh,
to
yeah,
ask
Don,
Patrick.
okay, I'm sorry.
I think Tom Lynn did as well. Just on the Easter Bunny, I'm glad you remembered to mention that, Patrick, because I heard a lot of good comments from people too. And I did see some things on Facebook that tickled me. It was a great idea, so that was great. Question I had, I mentioned it to you on my report. This was for the purpose of mitigating a fish barrier within the Mill Creek. I bring it up because if we're going to start doing this work down there, can you tell us what kind of a response you got to the letter you sent?
I'll have to look into it. I'll get back with you, Don, on that one.
Sure.
I don't have it in front of me right now.
I just thought whatever it is, if they're going to move forward with it, now would be the time to do it in connection with the other work.
Yeah, I'll look into it.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Don.
Mr. Lynn?
Yes, I wanted to thank everybody that was involved in that parade. I know that some of my neighbors were sitting on their porch just waiting for that Easter Bunny to show. So I think it was impressive and a good idea and a good show for the city of Reading. So thank everybody involved.
Great. All right, thank you, Mr. Ross. Now, Law Director, Mr. Stevenson.
Chris, I don't have any formal report. I would note that the one resolution that is on the that was a late addition tonight. It is the culmination of a working group that's been together for now several weeks, consisting of the treasurer, the auditor, the assistant or the deputy treasurers, Mr. Gertz, Mr. Ross, and myself. So it doesn't mean we're going to run out and borrow $3 million, but it does give them some flexibility to the extent that if we do need the money in the future, they can figure out what needs to happen and bring it back to council for its approval. That's all I have.
Okay. We'll get to that in just a few minutes, I guess. And the auditor, Ms. Smith.
Thank you, Chris. As I talked about before, I just wanted to report quickly the city earnings tax, like month to date, we're at $649,000. The general fund is at $283,000. So that's as of today. And then I also wanted to just give an update. We're doing payables in my office. I've had several conversations with our group on Fridays, on some Fridays that we've done, as well as Mr. Ross, as well as the treasurer's office, as well as Mel. We're kind of staying on top of things so we know where things are at. Basically, trying to limit expenditures and just making sure that, everything is bought for a purpose, where it's coming from, and just kind of keep that conversation going. So I've also been a part of many webinars that, people are doing, whether it's our representatives or the Ohio Municipal League, and sending off information to, a core group here at the city, so that way we can get all those things talked about. Just trying to stay on top of it from our end. And, I don't want to sit here and stay quiet with our expenditures. I want to make sure everybody knows where we're at. So, and that's it for me, Chris.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Smith.
Chris.
We will go to
Chris.
Yes, Don, go ahead. I keep forgetting to look for hands. Go
That's
ahead,
all right. Sabrina, can you tell us maybe off the top of your head, what is the monthly payroll combined for police, fire, public works, everybody? Do you have an idea what that is? Because I'm concerned about what kind of money's coming in, and we know what's, you may know exactly what's going to go out.
Yeah, so we have two monthly payrolls. One rides about $205,000. That's the monthly one. And then the biweekly one's about $175,000. But, to remind people, we have 26 pay periods. So we're coming up on May that has a 3 pay period month. Just to remind everybody, but that'll be the smaller one. That'll be another 175,000 or so for the month. So 205 plus 175. Payroll alone is 380,000. Now that's not including benefits.
Okay, and so 380,000, and you're saying that we just received in what, 500 and some $1,000 so far in April, which is usually our biggest month, which is about $800,000 less than what we usually get. So just to let everybody know, we're not living on easy street here in Reading. Thank you, Sabrina.
Thank you, Don.
Thank you, Don. Thank you, Ms. Smith. Reading of our first resolution.
Do you want the one from last week?
Yes, we'll read the second reading from last week first, and this is a
I
reading
mean,
of
do
the
you
whole.
want the one that was passed from last week?
Oh yeah, I'm sorry about that. Go ahead.
Sorry, I'm just scrambling to it then. Okay. Oh, I'm sorry, that was an ordinance. Do you want me to do the resolution first? I'm sorry.
It doesn't matter. You can read last week's ordinance.
Okay. So the ordinance that was passed last week was ordinance 2020-16, and it was an ordinance to make appropriations for the current expenses and other expenditures of the city of Reading, state of Ohio, during the period ending December 31st, 2020.
All right, thank you. Then the first resolution.
This is a second reading, and I believe Mr. Gertz would like me to read it in its entirety. So I'll start with the title. It's a resolution retaining the law firm of Strauss Troy Co. LPA to initiate legal action on behalf of the city of Reading against the Reading Community City School District to enforce the requirements of Ordinance 2017-12. Whereas the Reading Community City School District, the school district, plan to construct a new school campus in the vicinity of East Benson Street, Columbia Avenue, and Bolster Drive, the project. And whereas the furtherance of the project, the school district filed an application with the City of Reading Planning Commission for the rezoning of 2 consolidated parcels of property. And whereas after reviewing the preliminary development plan for the project, the Planning Commission held a public hearing and recommended City Council of the City of Reading, City Council, approve the project. And whereas City Council scheduled a public hearing on January 17th, 2017, after which it unanimously passed Ordinance 2017-12, which established PPD number 2, the Reading Community Schools Planned Development District, and amended the zoning map to reflect its boundaries and provided certain criteria and limitations for the project. And whereas Section 4 of Ordinance 2017-12 included a requirement for the project that all utilities be entirely underground, including any cables, wires, conductors, fibers, or any other means of linking or connecting any system such as, but not limited to, lighting, signaling, or video surveillance, this on every part of the site, including the auxiliary parking lot. And whereas, as part of the project, the school district relocated some utility lines along its property and did not place them underground as required by the terms of Ordinance 2017-12. And whereas the superintendent of the school district sent a letter to the city on September 25th, 2019, requesting the city waive the requirement that all utility lines placed underground because of the cost to the school district to comply. And whereas the city initially denied the school district's request to waive the requirements. And whereas the school district then appealed that decision by filing a formal request to Planning Commission and then City Council to amend the requirements of Ordinance 2017-12. And whereas City Council voted not to approve the requested amendment and the school district is still refusing to comply with the requirement of Ordinance 2017-12. That all utility lines associated with the project be placed underground. And whereas City Council has tried for several months to negotiate a resolution with the school district and has been unable to reach a resolution. And whereas, because a dispute has arisen between the city and the school district related to the school district's refusal to comply with City Council's ordinance, City Council seeks to engage special legal counsel to file an action on behalf of the city to require the school district to comply with Ordinance 2017-12 and seeking damages associated therewith. Now, therefore, be it ordained by the council of the city of Reading, Ohio, members elected thereto concurring. Section 1. Council of the City of Reading hereby engages and authorizes the Safety Service Director to enter into a contract with the law firm of Strauss Troy Co. LPA to file an action on behalf of the City of Reading against the Reading Community School District to comply with all requirements of Ordinance 2017-12, including the requirement that all utility lines associated with the project be placed underground. Section 2. Council hereby finds and determines that all formal actions relative to the passage of this legislation were taken in an open meeting of this council, and that all deliberations of this council and of its committees, if any, which resulted in formal action, were taken in meetings open to the public in full compliance with applicable legal requirements, including Section 121.22 of the Ohio Revised Code. Section 3, this resolution shall take effect on the earliest date allowed by law.
Motion to suspend the rules for the third reading. Second.
Motion made by Mr. Lindeman, seconded by, I couldn't tell who said that.
Albrecht.
Mr. Albrecht. To suspend the rule, it requires a third reading for this resolution. Roll call.
Mr. Powell,
Abstain because of conflict of interest.
Mr. Gertz,
Yes.
Mr. Lynn,
Yes.
Mr. Albrecht,
Yes.
Mr. Lindeman,
Yes.
Mr. Fischescher,
No.
Mrs. Edichico.
No.
We will have a third reading in the fourth week of April for this resolution. Okay, let's go to our second resolution.
Mr. President,
Yes.
I just wanted to make sure that the letters from Mr. Mounts and Mr. Ashbrook, were they received into the record so that I apologize, I don't recall. If not, I want to make a motion that they be put into the record.
Okay, motion made by Mr. Gertz. Anyone want a second?
Sure, second.
Second by Mr. Lindeman to make sure that the written notes to clerk council are received and filed with the minutes and for this meeting. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, that's taken care of. We'll go ahead and have the second resolution then read. Do we need to read the whole thing, Dave, or just by title?
You only need to read it by title.
Okay, thank you.
A resolution authorizing the Safety Service Director, the Treasurer, and the Auditor to explore the need for incurring debt for the purpose of stabilizing the finances of the City of Reading during the period of declared emergency due to the COVID-19 pandemic.
Make a motion to suspend the rules.
rule requiring a second and third reading.
Second.
Motion made by Mr. Fischescher, seconded by Mr. Albrecht to suspend the rule that requires a second and third reading. Roll call.
Mr. Powell,
Yes.
Mr. Gertz,
Yes.
Mr. Lynn,
Yes.
Mr. Albrecht,
Yes.
Mr. Lindeman,
Yes.
Mr. Fischescher,
Yes.
Mrs. Edichico.
Yes.
That motion passed.
Motion to adopt.
Second.
Motion made by Mr. Lynn, seconded by Mr. Fischescher to adopt the ordinance. Roll call.
Mr. Powell,
Yes.
Mr. Gertz,
Yes.
Mr. Lynn,
Yes.
Mr. Albrecht,
Yes.
Mr. Lindeman,
Yes.
Mr. Fish Usher,
Yes.
Mrs. Edichico.
Yes.
That motion passed. The resolution is adopted in resolution number
2020-17R.
Thank you. And then our first reading of the ordinance for this evening.
An ordinance directing the employment of Deerdorf Appraisal Service to conduct an appropriate appraisal for the City of Reading Veterans Memorial Stadium located in the City of Reading, and further to employ Joseph W.
Alec.
Okay, attorney at law to conduct a thorough title examination of the property located on West Street in the City of Reading and declaring an emergency.
Discussion.
Go ahead, Mr. Powell.
You know, I read the resolution and I do agree that an appraisal needs to be done. Title search needs to be done, but I question the timing on it. There's a time and a place for everything. And my personal opinion is that with the uncertainty that is going on right now, that I think it would be foolish to spend that money.
Chris, I also have a couple of
Go
questions.
ahead, Mr. Fish Usher.
These are for Dave. Number one, are you able to do title searches that we would need to hire an outside attorney to do a title search?
Randy, I don't do title searches in my practice. I have done a few, but this requires somebody that has that specialty.
Okay. Then in section 5, President and Council of the City of Reading execute all necessary contracts. I thought that administration was the only ones that could work contracts or sign contracts.
Yeah, I don't think President of Council has any.
Got a question for Dave?
Yeah, it's
Yes.
a question for Mr. Stevenson.
Yeah,
I have
the
the same
The
question.
safety service director would be the contracting authority.
Right.
I had a comment that I wanted to make about that, Dave, if you don't mind.
Go ahead.
But my goal of having, there has been a lot of discussion concerning, the appropriate way to approach this that was not intended to, it was not intended to offend the administration. It was actually to benefit the administration so that they were out of the loop of having to be criticized. I've dealt with Deerdorf and I've dealt with Alec I've known Joan Alec for 50 years. And I know that it would not put anybody in the burden of having to be criticized for either getting an appraiser that would do a low ball or appraiser who would do a high ball. And that was the primary purpose. But President Council, we talked about even doing improvements to the council chambers. It's my understanding that council can employ people, if that has to be the case, to have the safety service director sign the contract. That doesn't create a big problem for me, but nevertheless, I thought it was a way to keep them out of the loop so that they couldn't be in any kind of conflict. I do have some other comments about what Dave had to say. The issue.
Well, let's finish this one here. I'd like to hear Dave Stevenson's comment about anything that the president would have to do on this. I think it's council directing the safety service director to do it, and that's part of his service. No, I don't feel comfortable being in a position of even looking at contracts. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not the city service director.
Are you asking a question?
Yeah, I'm asking a question. Is it appropriate for me to have for the president of council be listed here in section 5?
I said before, the safety service director is a contracting
I know.
authority for this
I
kind
just
of
want to
stuff,
make sure I heard it twice from you and not just once from you. So for that, I'd like to have that part of the ordinance changed before we even start to think about. So it should read the safety service director shall execute. Anyone
I'll
want a
make a
motion to make that change?
I'll make a motion to amend the ordinance to state that the safety service director would sign the contract.
Mr. Albrecht, I think, lipped second, so, or, motion by Mr. Gertz, second by Mr. Albrecht to change section 5 to safety service director from president of council. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay,
Aye.
that's been changed. Now you can go ahead and address Mr. Powell's comments if you want, Mr. Gertz.
Yes, I understand what Dave is saying, but the $3,000 involved, I don't know that it'll even cost the total. That's not to exceed. And I think it behooves us to know, even in these trying times, what our possibilities are of the use of the property. And secondly, as I mentioned earlier, and I'm not to digress and go into all the same explanations I gave it to Mrs. Edichico, but at the same time, I think it's good for us to get the truth. There's been so much said about the status of the title and what it can be used for, and who can whether there's any protective covenants, restrictions, requirements. I'd like to get the true answer to that problem. And even with my discussion with the solicitor before I drafted this, I originally looked at it as an appraisal, and I'm not putting words into Dave's mouth. He can speak for himself, but I added the title exam kind of as an additional effort to get all the answers we need about the stadium property. So those are my comments to you. Without further ado, I'll make a motion to suspend the rules for a second and third reading.
Additional discussion based on that. At this time, the recorder's office is closed to the public, so title exam is probably not even possible at this point to dig back into the records like they're going to need to.
Okay.
I also agree with Dave that I think the timing on this is terrible.
Mhm.
That, you know, we sit here and we talk about taking out a $3 million loan, which we have no idea how we're going to pay that back. Now you could say, well, it's only $3,000, but I think we can get to the point where $3,000 is needed. And, you know, I don't see why there's a rush on this. The school is already, if I recall correctly, wouldn't even sign a contract for 3 years because they don't know where their money's coming from. You know, I just think the timing on this is way off.
Okay, I have a motion from Mr. Gertz.
I would like to make one comment that David's talking about. The period is 30 days, and it appears that things are going to be opening up during May. I don't think that's going to be an issue. It'll be, by the time the contract would be signed and the work would be done, the city or the courthouse will be available, and most title examiners have the right to get into the building anyway.
Chris?
Yes, Mr. Lindeman.
I agree about the thought behind doing these things. I don't agree with the timing. I even suggested that Mr. Gertz maybe remove this tonight because it may not be voted favorably. So I just think the timing is very bad too. I agree with Randy on that, and I made that clear to Mr. Gertz earlier. So.
Okay. Well, I have a motion from Mr.
I also
Gertz.
told Mr. Lindeman my reasons of wanting to pursue it, so he understands.
Yes. So I have a motion from Mr. Gertz to suspend the rule. It requires a second and third reading. Do I have a second? So there is no second. So this will be a first reading, and we will have it on the agenda for next week. Any other business not related to city council, anything going on anywhere else? If not, it's 9 o'clock.
I do.
Go ahead, Mr. Ross.
Just real quick. This is just a nuts and bolt thing with Carla and Dave and you, Chris. I need to send over a signed copy. I already uploaded for the county auditor our appropriations, but I need to get a signed copy. Are you guys all working from home where I could just drive by each of your houses and get your signature? That way I can get them a signed copy.
Patrick, you can either drive by or I can come down. I'm not going to be in tomorrow because I have a meeting at the Board of Elections. I won't be in until late afternoon tomorrow.
Okay.
I can actually stop by City Hall on the way home if you want me to do that.
Well, it's locked from the outside, but
I can call you.
yeah, just call me. Just call
Yeah,
me.
if you're out, Mr. Ross, just stop by whenever.
Well, that's why I thought I could get both of you up in Eagle View.
Yeah, I'm not going anywhere.
Well, yeah, if it's easier for you to come up to Eagle View and get both of us at the same time.
Actually, all three of you. I can get all three of you.
Right.
With one grenade. Yep.
Okay, I'll text you guys tomorrow. I just wanted to make sure you guys were available.
Okay, great. Any other business?
Chris, I have something.
Go ahead.
I know this has been a crazy school year, and I've been contacted by a few people through Facebook about if the city wants to do anything to honor the senior class that's graduating. I do know that the school board and the administrators are working on rescheduling graduation, so there will be an actual graduation ceremony. Unfortunately, they can't say when because they're basically just waiting for any further notice from Governor DeWine. That said, since graduation was originally scheduled for Thursday, June 4th, I think we as a community should do something not only for the Reading High School seniors, but all the private school seniors that are graduating this year as well. And to do something around that date, maybe on that weekend. I was thinking something along simple blue ribbons along light posts, trees, telephone poles. And then we can also incorporate colors from the private schools as well. I've been making a list, getting some input from Facebook about who's graduating from where. So if we decided to do that, we can use those colors. James Shelton did suggest a parade. And I think that's a great idea. I think a lot of people like that idea. It would also have to fall within any social distancing requirements that would be in effect at that time. And we could also ask the private school students if they want to join in that, decorate their cars, however they want to do it. And someone also had the idea that Mr. Lafata, since he's retiring, could be the Grand Marshal. And then there's 2 other faculty members that are retiring, so they can join in as well. And another idea was a sign across Reading Road congratulating all the seniors. I was tagged in a post about a town that did individual signs with each senior's portrait on it. I looked into it and it looks like a smaller town. We have 92 seniors graduating just from Reading, so I don't know if that would work here and what the cost would be for something like that. But I do like the idea of a big sign across the entrance of the city on Reading Road, if that's something. But I'll be willing to work with the school to do something for them. It's been a tough year for them, and I just wanted to get any input from council.
Katie, on the sign across Reading Road, that they just have to get with me and make sure nothing's pre-scheduled.
Okay.
But private organizations make the signs, and then they, get with me, and then our public works guys put them up. Yeah, the pictures one would not work because there's too many kids.
Right.
We don't have. You have to buy the hardware. You'd have to buy brand new hardware and then it's not feasible to do the pictures. It looks awesome and it's nice. If we had like a class of 12, like my 8th grade class, you might be able to do that. But a class of 90, and then you factor in the private school kids too.
Right.
It wouldn't be feasible. But just my 2 cents on those 2. But I mean, if they want to get the sign, ST Signs in Reading, they know the proper dimensions for the signs to be best looked at, because we've had some people in the past do their own signs, kind of did it online. And I can't remember who it was, but it was so small. It was almost like a hazard when you're driving down the road because you're trying to look at the tiny little print on the sign. And, I don't like recommending a company, but ST Signs does a lot of stuff. So if you choose to use them, it's fine, but they know the dimensions.
Mr. Lindeman.
I just want to mention to Katie that Mr. Gertz and a few other people put money together to put the Merry Christmas signs up, so he may know about the cost of that. And you think you went to ST Signs to have those done, didn't you, Mr. Gertz?
Yeah, so ST Signs is probably one of the finest companies that can do with this kind of work. And I highly recommend them. And yes, we do the Christmas. People donating $25 to $50 to pay for the signs, and they store them. They are owned by they're owned privately, so they're not building any walls to put them up. And so, yes, I highly recommend it.
This is Ed Chico. If you do that route and need donations, give me a call or send me an email.
Okay. Will do.
Anyone else?
I have a question for Sabrina. If you wouldn't mind, Sabrina, could you send those that report to me again, maybe at my home address? Because like I said, I tried to print it off a couple of times. I only got the last page, so must be.
Well, I think she sent it off again earlier in the meeting.
Okay.
Yeah, did everybody get the 5 attachments with it that I sent to everybody?
I got it.
Just now?
I have
During
it.
the meeting.
I've had
I sent it at 7:54.
Okay, then if I don't get it, I'll call you tomorrow.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, everyone. And this meeting is adjourned. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Josh. You helped me out a great deal.
Thank you guys. Have a good night.
Thanks, everybody.
We'll see you.